Welcome back, everybody. There's some new faces again from this morning. Thank you so much for this morning. This afternoon, we have got a lady called Kate joining us. This is Kate Dalgleish. And it's quite interesting. I'll let Kate talk about all this, but Kate is somebody who we've come to know, who has seen an awful lot very quickly and has really kind of not just turned around her own life. Are we recording this? Yeah, not just turned around her own life, but like has really kind of inspired change within a family. And one aspect of the family in particular was quite challenging. And so, without too much of an introduction, because I want to give Kate the time, I just want to say thank you to Kate for agreeing to do this. She's somebody who we deeply love, and she's got a lovely voice.
Oh, don't go on about my voice.
Like a voice. Well, Kate, are you happy to make a start?
Yeah, I'm happy to make a start. Yeah, you can hear me now?
We can. We're going to mute ourselves and we're going to let you take over.
So I was really pleased when Dave and Jen asked me to speak, because it's just such a lovely message to share. And the funny thing is if I look back to my life this time last year, I was in a completely different place. And you just cannot predict the future, because although we think we can, because if I had looked, if then I had thought that I'd be sitting here talking to you now, and also being on a retreat where tomorrow one of the guest speakers is Dickon Bettinger, I mean, I just never would have believed you. Dickon was actually one of the first people that I heard speak. And he was one of the first people who, when Georgia heard speak, she would just get into this lovely feeling. And I think that was part of the reason I knew that this was the right direction to look in, because when I'd taken her to other things, in the known, I'd taken her for CBT. She was suffering with anxiety. And when I'd taken her
George is your daughter, isn't she?
Sure. Oh, sorry. I'm assuming lots of knowledge about my daughter. Okay, so I'll go back a little bit. So Georgia is my now 15-year-old who, well, I was going to come back to that when I was saying why I was listening to Dickon. But anyway, so she's 15, and when she was about 12, she started to really focus on anxious thoughts, and she became very anxious. But I didn't at the time know what she was doing. And so we went to look for help with CBT and with some counselling, and it was a real struggle, because I didn't know she was okay, she didn't know she was okay. And then someone mentioned the principles, the 3 principles, and then I listened. My first ever listening was to Dickon Bettinger, and George's response to that was like, this makes sense. And so we listened to Dickon, and then over the course, and I've talked about this a lot, and I think a lot of people on here will have heard me talk about Georgia's journey. But basically, we went this time last year, we were in a place of complete darkness. We were in a place of complete struggle, and then we came across the principles, and we listened intellectually for a while before we went to see Dave and Jen, and then everything changed. And now Georgia is, it didn't change so quickly for Georgia, but now she was at that point, she wasn't going to school. She was really struggling with she got to the point, so this time last year, she would really find it difficult to just get up in the morning, because as soon as she woke up, she'd focus immediately on these anxious thoughts. And then it was just a real struggle. And so that was where we were this time last year. Now she's just completely flying. She's back at school. You wouldn't know that she'd ever been anxious, really. So what I was going to share with you today, because I have talked a lot about that in the other videos that we've done, and I was going to share with you today what I was reflecting on life before this understanding and life with this understanding, and how it just changes everything. And if anyone's heard any of the videos we've done before, you'll know that I do tend to talk a lot in metaphors, because this seems to be how we share the principles. And every time I come across this metaphor, it sort of grows. I always think, well, that'll be the last one. And then another one will sort of appear, which I see the nature of this. It's just going to keep appearing and appearing and changing. And so this one was someone said to me something the other day about the library of my soul. And I don't even know what context they were speaking. I don't know why. I don't even know what we were talking about. And that's the thing, you see, there's no rules to this, and I just use whatever comes to me. And so someone talked about the library of their soul, and then I remembered in one of my videos I'd been talking about the window of my soul, and so these sort of merged together, and so I'm starting to visualize this library, and I found this really helpful. So if you with these, if you just go with it and actually visualize with me and just see where it takes you. But for me, before this understanding, I was sitting on the floor with this head torch, and I'm sitting in the dark. Maybe I didn't even know I was in a library, but I'm sitting there and I've got this head torch, and I'm shining on a very small section of books. And it's not that I love these books, it's just that that's all I can see. And so these are the books, depending on what mood I'm in, are the different ones that I read. And also there's this really heavy, big leather reference book, and it's got Kate written across the front. And this book is the one that I pay a lot of attention to, because it's got this section at the beginning which is all experience. And so there's various experiences in this book, and then underneath each experience you've got a handwritten account by me. So therefore I know it's true because I've written it. It's got to be true, right? And then there's another section in this book, in this big reference book, which is called belief. And in this section, again, it's handwritten by me, so it's got to be true. And here I've got, for example, Kate is low self-esteem in certain areas. And then it's got these page numbers underneath. So you can go back and you can look in the experience as to why Kate's low self-esteem. So you look at page 21, you see that she went to a school which very much focused on failure. And yeah, that's part of the reason why Kate is low self-esteem. And there's, Kate worries a lot. And we go back and we look as to why Kate worries, and that's because of X, Y, and Z in this experience. And I'm constantly writing this. It's a bit like Wikipedia, because I'm constantly adding to it, because now I've got children, and I also have belief about my children. So Georgia is what is she, Dave? She's highly sensitive, and so there's this whole section that I've written about Georgia, so I know it's true because I've written it. So I spend a lot of time with this reference book, and this is how I live, and that's all fine. And I go and see Dave and Jen, and Dave and Jen, they're like, just open the shutters. Just open the windows, Kate. And I'm there going, well, no, I'm fine. I don't need to do that. I'm fine. I'm okay where I am. And I'm there saying, but you know, Georgia, she needs to open the windows. She needs to see what you're saying. So I'm listening, you know, for a couple of days, and I'm waiting, you know, for Georgia to open the windows, because she's the one who needs to open the windows, right? She's the one who's not okay. And then on day 3, it's always day 3. I think it's always the Trinity, day 3. Day 3, I just thought, oh God, Dave and Jen are just going on and on and on about this bloody window. I'll just open the window. And I open the shutters, and everything changes. It's like, that's the point where just the light just came flooding in. And it's not like the light wasn't there all the time. The light was always there. But I'm the one who's got to open the window. I'm the one who's got to open the shutters. No one can do that for me. And so now that I've got this light shining in, I can see that I've been living in such a limited, you know, I've been looking at this small section, and actually there's just, oh my God, there's just infinite number of books in this library that I could be looking at. But I've been focusing on this small section, and there's just this infinite possibility. And it's just opening up a whole new experience. And I start to gradually see, and that's the thing, once the light's coming in, you start to see, if you allow it to, this understanding just unfolds. So it's like, I started to gradually see, and I'm still seeing, the nature of thought. And so, but very quickly, I mean, this has got nothing to do with time, as we always say. It's just got to do with a willingness to let go of everything you thought you knew. So I'm very quickly, so on this is on day 4 now, when I'm with Dave and Jen, and I've talked about this before, when I'm sitting in the back of the car and I'm feeling really car sick. Dave's driving along this wiggly, longest, thinnest road or something in the pouring rain. And I'm sitting in the back of the car, and because the light is now shining in and I'm starting to see this endless possibility, that I see that and I don't know why, and the thing is not to question too much. You don't have to make sense of why. I think we like to make sense of everything, but for some reason, this thought came to me that I'm looking at this book, and this book is one that I've looked at for the last 20 years or so, and this one's about my dad. And it's funny because this book, what happens is once we read a story, because they're all stories, what happens is we get immersed in the story, and that creates our reality. So that's how it works. Whichever book we focus on, or whichever thought we focus on, then that becomes our reality. And so I'm looking at this book, and this book is about Dad. And I've been reading this familiar book for 20 years. And what this book was that when the story was, because it is a story, when Dad had died when I was about 21, in this story, it was that he suffered, that he was lonely, that he was in complete anguish and pain. And I kept reading that story for years. And when I was with Dave and Jen, I was sitting in the back of the car, and it was like, so reading that story created my reality. And my reality was that I couldn't talk about Dad. I couldn't even think about Dad because, I'd go automatically to this story, which was so horrible that my reality was then, it would just create all these feelings, because that's what happens. We create feelings through the thoughts we focus on. And the feelings were so difficult that I never wanted to talk about Dad. And anyway, so I'm in the back of the car, and it's like in Alice in Wonderland when there's that little bottle that says, you know, drink me. And there's another book that's just sort of poking out, like quite tempting. So I take that book and I focus on that one instead. And I open up this story, and it says, the first lines in this story are, "You weren't there." And this story seems quite compelling. So I start to read this one. In order to read this one, I have to put the other one down. So I put the other one down now. And that's like when Sydney Banks talks about emptying the glass when you fill it with, you know, stale wine, and then emptying it out to get the fresh. And so I put the first story down, and I'm reading the next story, and this one says, "You weren't there." And this is a real different feeling to this story, because it's all about hope and possibility. And, you know, maybe Dad saw the light that you're now seeing. You know, maybe Dad felt this energy and this love, and this was running through him the same way as you. And so I start to read that story, and it's just like such a different feeling. You know, and now I'm talking to all you people about my dad, having not, you know, talked about him for 25 years because I couldn't talk about him. And it's just like, that first story, it wasn't real. The second one isn't real either. None of them are real. But the point is, we can choose which ones we focus on. And someone might say, well, you're just in denial. You're just trying to change the story. And I'm like, well, I'm not writing these books. You know, once a book's been written, it's been written. I can't change it. I'm not creating these stories. These stories, you know, the thoughts, you know, created by mind, by the universal. I'm not creating thought. It's running through me, and I can focus on whatever. I have that free will. But the freedom that brings, and the change that it brings. And my friend who, my therapy friend, she's a, well, I call her my therapy friend because she's training to be a therapist, and she doesn't believe anything I say. And she actually she's the complete opposite. So she sees life happening to you, and I see life happening from within. And she really doesn't believe anything I say, but that's okay. She's still my friend. And I happened to mention this to her, and she said, "Oh my God." She said, "That's incredible." She said, "That's a lot of work, right? You've been looking in your reference book, and you've been looking at, you know, all your experience, and you've come out with this." And I said, "No, I haven't." I said, "What reference book?" "Oh, I've put that down. It was boring." And I said to her, "I just changed my mind. I just chose another book. I just chose another thought, or I chose to focus on another thought." And she just thought I was mad. That's okay. But the fact is, it just changes everything. It just changes. It changes everything. And the thing is, if you go back to that reference book was so appealing to me for so long because it's written by me. So it had to be true. And if I can just throw the tiniest bit of doubt on that book, then maybe I can sort of convince people to just see there's a possibility that it's not true. And there's so many ways that you can, there's so many clues to it not being true. And I've got some, I mean, I can just think of some last week, which they're just like completely neutral stuff that just happens with my kids or Pete and so the other day we were watching this video, and Charlie he's my 12-year-old, and he was singing. It was a video when he was about 6, and he was singing that Aled Jones, I'm Walking in the Air. And we're watching this video, and Charlie's looking at me, and he went, "Mum, you told me I was good." I've got that. I can't help myself. I mean, there was this. We just were laughing, and I said, Charlie, I said, I really thought you were good. You know, and if I look back in the reference book, I have written down that Charlie, you know, he might be a chorister at Westminster one year. I mean, that is what I thought at the time. I wasn't lying to myself. I don't know why I thought it. I mean, he's a nice singer, but you know, he might listen to this, so I'm now going to stop on that. But the fact is, what is true? You know, it's not we lie to ourselves, but for whatever reason, we choose whatever thought, and that was my thought at that time. I really thought he was an amazing singer. And then there was Pete and I were invited to this dance thing, which it was Scottish dancing, and Pete was all being really stroppy about it. And I was like, what is your problem? You know, you're a brilliant dancer, and you're going to have a lovely evening with me. What could be wrong with this? And he's like, Kate, and this is funny because Pete believes in this reference book, and Pete said, Kate, if you look at page, 24 of my book, Pete, you'll see that I did Scottish dancing at the age of 7 and 8, and when I went wrong, I would get clipped around the ears, and it was really serious and it wasn't fun, and I don't enjoy Scottish dancing. He actually, and this is what he said next, he said, I am my experience. And that's what Pete believes, and that's fine. But we then went to this dance, and we had a great evening, and Pete knows how to Scottish dance, so it was even better, and it was really fun. But I could guarantee, if you asked him whether he liked Scottish dancing, he would go back to that reference book and he would say no, he doesn't like Scottish dancing, because he's very attached to that experience. And this is the thing about belief. It is very compelling. We think it's true, but it's like, I had a haircut once, which was I wasn't looking, and the hairdresser cut my hair, the fringe, right up here, like I looked up and I was like one of those Playmobil characters with like a helmet on. And what am I going to do? I'm going to put that in my reference book and say, this is me. But you see, I sort of know that my hair is going to grow and I'm going to change. And yet we have these snapshots of our life and we go, that's me, that's who I am. And it's like when my cousin would talk about, we'd have a conversation and she'd say, well, that's because I am low self-esteem. And I'd say, well, are you? And she'd go, yeah, I am, because if you look at my reference book, in my experience, you'll see that my mum didn't tell me she loved me. So I am low self-esteem. And then I think, well, my mum didn't tell me she loved me, but I just thought that was mum, because maybe that generation don't really tell you they love you very much, or I didn't really focus on that, so I didn't even write it in my reference book, but she did, and she pays a lot of attention to that. So I don't know if that even gives any doubt on this reference book that I had held so important. And the other thing to throw a bit of doubt on it is that if I look at George's reference book, then we both have the same experiences. We both have written down the same experiences. And yet underneath, the date might be the same and the event might be the same, but underneath her account is completely different to my account. So which one's true? And then the more you see this, the more you see that none of it's true. None of it's true. And then when you see that none of it's true, then you're not limited by it. Because if I was looking in that reference book right now, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here speaking to you because, well, Kate doesn't do that. So when you let go of that, then it does bring a freedom. And the thing is about this library is that some of these books, we find them really compelling, even though we're not enjoying them. And sometimes we get really caught up in a book, and we get caught up in what I was called to Georgia, a thought cloud or a thought storm, and we do this all the time. And we forget there's this, you know, that there's this window, or we don't know that there's a window. And the thing is, when we get caught up, we've got such a clever design, because, and actually Dickens talks about this a lot, because we've got this design where when we get caught up, then it comes out in our feelings, and our feelings show us what's going on. So we start to get anxious, or we start to get whatever it is when we get really caught up. And then this is the librarian, where she comes into, or he, the librarian in the library, is there sort of saying, shh. And we're going, no, we're taking out, we're trying to find a nicer feeling in these books. So I don't like that story now, so I'm going to read this one, and then I'm going to read this one, and we're looking for a nicer feeling. And we're getting more agitated, and and the librarian's there going, shh, quiet now, just take a break. Just go to the window and look out the window. And sometimes we just don't want to, and we carry on, and we get more and more caught up. But the more you see this, and now I just love this part of this understanding, is that you can leave all the books alone. And this is what I didn't understand before. And people always sort of say, you know, get present and, you know, get out of your thinking. And I never knew what that meant. I didn't know what that meant. And so now I just know what it means, because what it means is that there's this window, and you can leave the books and you go across to the window, and that's where the light is. And that's where you give yourself a bit of a rest. And it's a completely different space. It's a completely different, it's just passive. And it is where you feel energized, and then you come back into the library again. You're in you come back and you can read your books again. But it's just, that's a window of my soul. That's when when I'm walking the dogs, and I just reflect, and new things come to me. But I didn't know that space existed before. And I think that what I'm getting at here as well is that some people with this understanding, they try and sort of do the principles, or they just look at thought. And so they're looking at these books, and unless you see that the window's there and spend some time sort of in the light, I mean, the light's always there, but then for me, this understanding didn't come alive. And that's when I think, you know, Sydney Banks would call it the missing link, because the principles are a trinity. And if you're only looking in one area, if you're just looking at the books and you're trying to find the answer just in your thought, and thoughts creating feelings, and that's not the whole thing. That's not the whole picture. So when Dave and Jen, they said, open the windows and see the light and let the light in. When I did that, that's when everything changed. That's when I got to see how this all works. And then I see, you know, that I'm not interested in that reference book anymore. I haven't had to do anything with it. It's not appealing anymore. And also, what I'm seeing more with this understanding is that I'm not sitting on the floor anymore. This is just, I'm sitting in the nice comfy armchair, because it's just, life is nicer this way. There's more joy, there's more fun, and there's more, it just makes more sense. And the thing is, there was this time when Dave said, on one of our videos recently, he said, I'd been talking about nature, and Dave had said, it's not that we reconnect with nature, it's that we are nature. And he said, some people think that we reconnect with nature. And I realized that I'm one of those people who thought that I reconnected with nature. And when he said we are nature, I just saw, again, there's an acceptance of this whole design. So when you sit back in the armchair and you get the whole picture, then you can just reflect on this design, and you can just see. And yet you wonder why, as humans, we spend our whole time trying to make sense of it rather than just accepting it, sitting back in the armchair and just accepting it, enjoying it, and all these amazing, this gift that we have. We spend our whole time, it'd be like a ladybird sort of saying, oh my God, why have I only got 4 spots? Because she's got 6 spots and I'm not good enough. Or like a caterpillar sort of, oh, why do I have to go through this whole caterpillar bit? Why can't I just skip to that? This doesn't make sense. Why do I have to do that? Nature doesn't seem to work that way. And yet we're designed with the same perfection. And yet we spend the whole time sort of looking at our faults or looking at some feelings that we don't like. I mean, my sister, my big sister, who's really starting to listen to this now, but she had a huge, I think the reason she's starting to listen is because she did have a huge sort of thought storm probably a couple of weeks ago. And she said, Kate, I just want someone to give me an instruction book on how to get rid of anxiety. I just want to get rid of that. And I was like, Charlotte, the thing is, she had this incident the other day when she runs a pool company, and she was taking on this new contractor, and this contractor, she had this thought, and the thought was, this contractor could be a bit of a loose cannon. I've heard a bit about him, and he could be tricky. And this thought created, the result was a little bit of anxiety. Now, I would say that's quite helpful. What she did innocently was she went straight to anxiety, and she went, oh my God, I'm feeling anxious. And she went, I don't like this. And it's like she's completely not seeing the gift of what it is okay, so what am I thinking? And maybe I'll not hire this guy, or maybe, I don't know what the answer would be, but instead she misses all of that and goes straight to anxiety and focus on it. I don't like this. And then it gets bigger, and then it gets bigger, and then she's in a complete anxious state. Take this one away. And then I was thinking about this time not long ago with Charlie, my 12-year-old, who he was going to some party, and he was in the car, and he was starting to feel a bit anxious. And I'm freezing, so I keep shaking because I'm so cold. I'm going to wrap myself up. Can you hear me shaking? So, my mum, Granny. So Charlie, so we were going to this party, and he starts to get anxious in the car. And I said to him, because it was a sleepover, and we've been in lockdown, he hasn't been on a sleepover, and blah, blah, blah. And he starts to feel a bit anxious. And I said, just out of interest, what are you focusing on right now? And he said, well, I'm going to get to this party. I mean, not party, to sleepover. And I'm going to be fine. And I'm going to be fine until this evening. And then I'm not going to be fine. Then I'm going to be anxious. I'm going to be upset. And I said, oh. And I said, well, I'm glad you can read the future. And I said, and the thing is, Charlie, you are off in the future, and that's fine. But while you're there, because the future doesn't exist, it might be a bit overwhelming, and that's why you might feel a bit anxious. And you're worried about tonight, you might feel like this, you might feel a bit anxious. I mean, you're not worrying that they're going to make you go and sleep out in the shed, or what, you know, you're worrying about a feeling at the end of the day. And he's listening. And then at that moment, we drove through this huge rainbow, one of those rainbows that's like really, really vivid. And I said, and we were looking at this rainbow, and I said, you know, you're probably, you're maybe purple on the rainbow right now. That's maybe the color that you're focusing on right now. And I said, and that's okay. And I said, and also though, if you look at the rainbow, see how you can see through the rainbow? And I said, this is what it's like. You know, you can just let these feelings run through you. You don't have to focus on how awful it is. You can just let it run through you. It's okay. You know, I get why you're feeling it, because you're thinking you're in the future and you're trying to predict what's going to happen and you can't. And so we talked about that, and that sort of made sense to him. It is common sense, a lot of this. It's very simple. And so he's fine, and he has a good night. And then the next morning he sends me a little message and says, you know, I'm on blue on the rainbow now, which for him, you know, for me, I was thinking blue. For him, that means fun, happy. And he said, you know, thanks, Mum. But the funny thing was, when we arrived at his friend's house, the mum, she saw that he'd been a bit upset, and she went, Charlie, don't be upset. And he's looking at me going, you just told me it's okay to be upset. You've told me this is all okay. And I'm going, don't listen to her. I'm saying it's fine that he's upset. Let's not start all this again. But, you know, there is that thing that some feelings are not okay. We think, you know, don't feel that. And now, so for example, with Georgia, she went through, you know, a phase of what she would do. My sister actually was talking about something I think Michael Neal had talked about, is not revving the accelerator. And you also don't have to put your foot on the brake. You can just take your foot off the accelerator. And Georgia, what she would do is she would not think that the anxious thoughts were okay at all. And she would slam on the brakes. And it meant that she couldn't go to school. And she didn't see also that she had an option to put the story down. She had an option not to focus on these anxious thoughts. She didn't see that she could go to the window. She didn't see that she could not engage with the thoughts at all if she wanted. But now she does. So now what she does is she goes to school, and now she doesn't seem to feel it. But when she first started going back to school after COVID, I could see her in the car. She was a bit like me now, shaking because I'm so cold. So she'd be shaking in the car, getting out of the car. So I knew she was anxious. I knew that the anxiety was there, but she just let it run through her. She didn't do anything with it. She just accepted it. You know, I'm a bit anxious. It's not going to kill me. She'd come to this point where she was just okay with that. And she'd get out of the car, and then the next day she'd be shaking a little bit less, and the next day she'd be shaking a little bit less, and the next day, and now she's completely, it's just like she doesn't focus on it at all. So she's just completely fine. And then I was thinking about, yesterday I had a conversation with a friend of mine who hasn't really come across the principles that much. And she's got 4 children, and she rang me up and she said, and I just thought this was useful. I mean, maybe not. She's got 4 children. She rang me up and she said my child is, one of her children is being really difficult. And she said that, so this is, I'm going to give you sort of in a nutshell what happened. So she said, my child is really difficult. And she said, you know, and she's behaving really badly. And my other 3 children were never like this. And she said, for example, a couple of nights ago, she lied to us, and she took her phone to, she took her phone up to, you know, to her room at night when she's not allowed to do that because she has to keep it downstairs. And then she'd been up all night, and in the morning she was just foul. And then she was telling her mum how awful her mum was, and la la la. So all this was going on. And she said, and this was one of the worst things for my friend. She said she went to school and she came home and it was as if nothing had happened. She said, can you believe that? She came home as if nothing had happened. And I was like, we need to talk about this. And she just screamed at me. And then my friend was saying, you know, I've asked her if she wants to go and see the school counsellor, because she obviously needs to see the school counsellor and talk about this. And then she screamed at me even more, you know, so she's obviously emotionally stunted in some way because, and then the other interesting thing was she said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do now about my child. And then, so at that point, my phone goes dead because my phone always goes dead. And actually, I don't know if you can see, so this is important here. My hands are shaking too much to turn my phone on. So these were the pictures that I sent you, Jen. Can you actually see them on the screen or not? Hang on. Can you see? There and there. Okay, there. All right. So that was yesterday. That was my walk yesterday. So because my phone's now gone dead, the conversation's finished. So I'm just left reflecting. And I was looking at the sky. And it just occurred to me that there's so much learning just in that one little event. And, you know, whether my friend learns it or not, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of learning for me because I reflected on it and I could sort of see what was happening. And the first thing I saw was that both my friend and my friend's daughter are both in completely different realities. And what they're both doing is they're choosing, if we go back to the library, they're both choosing focusing on different books. You know, we don't focus on the same thoughts. We all choose our own. We choose which ones we're going to focus on. And so for whatever reason, and it doesn't really matter, you don't have to make sense of everything. For whatever reason, my friend's daughter focused on the thought that, you know, she wanted to have the phone. Maybe her friends were all going to be chatting late at night. And then maybe she thought, well, shall I ask my mum? And then she went to her reference book and she looked in at this, the reference book, and the reference book says, well, your mum's going to say no. And the reference book also said, you know, you're the difficult one. You know, you're the naughty one. So maybe that's the sort of thing you do. You'll take the phone because this is what you're following, what this reference book is telling you anyway, because everyone's telling you you're the difficult and the naughty one. So you take the phone and then you're on the phone half through the night, and then you wake up in the morning and, you know, this daughter is completely knackered and she's been found out because they know that she's had the phone all night. And so at this point, she's in a really low mood, but she's got no idea where all these feelings that she's now focusing on are coming from. So she's feeling really angry. She's feeling, you know, she's lashing out at her mum. She's feeling horrible. But she doesn't really know what she's doing. She doesn't know where those feelings are coming from. And the mum, at the same time, she's in her own reality, and she is looking at her reference book and her beliefs and the beliefs that she has about this particular child. And she sort of said, and she said to me, she said, well, this child is, it's difficult because she's a combination of my fiery nature and her father's stubbornness. So she's going to be tricky. And she's looking at the behavior, and she's really honing in and focusing on this behavior, which she doesn't like. But she doesn't see that she's also in this library, choosing different stories and looking at this reference book. And she doesn't see that, like that picture, those pictures that I showed you, both of them at this point are in the clouds. This is all cloud. So when in that talk, the first video that I remember putting on, it was when I saw that our thinking, our ego, our belief, this is all like the clouds. And the clouds seem, the thing is about the clouds is they're always moving. They can't be, we can't manipulate them, and we can't, but they're always, it's not a truth, because they're always moving and they're changing. And yet we think it's all true, but we don't see it's just our ego. And yet what's behind the clouds, the sun, the light, well, that never changes. And so we lose sight of our essence. And so then what happens is, and this is the interesting thing, so they're both completely in their egos, and they're both in their own realities, and they're both pretty stuck. And then what happens is the child goes off to school, and she does what we're built to do. So she gets more in the moment. She forgets about this whole stuff that's going on, because she's now focusing on something else. So when you focus on a new thought, and you focus on, then you create your reality. And now she's in the present, and she's off doing other stuff. And so what happens is her natural well-being returns, and her natural resilience. And it's like a cork. She's bobbed back up to the surface. And then she comes home, and she's all happy because she's bobbed back up, and she's back to her normal default, which is well-being. And her mum, innocently, because it is innocent, and I did exactly the same with Georgia, there's no blame here, is her mum is sort of saying, well, we need to focus on that behavior. We need to focus on what happened this morning. And the child, like Georgia, when I would want to focus on her anxiety, or with Jessie, when, wanted to focus on the eating disorder, the child quite rightly says, no, I don't want to focus on that. I don't know where that all came from. I don't know why I behaved like that. I don't know why I felt like that. So I don't want to sort of focus on that. And the thing is, this is again, looking at behavior rather than looking at the whole. And my therapy friend, she would say to me at this point, and this might be what some of you are thinking, she would say, well, so you're just condoning this behavior. You're just saying, well, she was all innocent, and therefore she didn't know what she was doing, so she didn't know that she was, that she didn't know what she was doing when she took the phone, or when she was behaving badly. And I would say to that, that's all the behavior. And I would say is, that's not the point. The point for me, when I reflected on this, is that when you focus on the behavior, and you're focusing on all those clouds, which are always moving anyway, when you focus on that, two things happen. The first thing is, there's straight away an illusion of separation between you and your child. There's a big disconnect, because you're not seeing your child anymore. You're seeing the behavior, and you're not seeing the whole. You're looking at the behavior. And the other thing that happens, and this is really important, I think, is that once you're focusing on the clouds, you you lose sight of the light behind the clouds, which is like saying you lose sight of your common sense. You lose sight of your wisdom. So I would say that any parent knows what to do once they are in this space where you're looking out the window and you're with that, you have that energy running through you, and you're connected with that wisdom. I mean, you're always connected to the wisdom, but from the clouds that get in the way, it's always there. So, and yet my friend was there saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And she was looking in all these books saying, if I take a look at this book or this book, or, and I was thinking, you do know what to do. You know, once you get away from all of the looking at the behavior and all the clouds, then you'll know what to do about the phone, about the lying, about what it is. You'll find that answer. I'm not going to tell you what to do about your child's phone, or the fact that your child is now swearing at you, or whatever it is. You'll know what to do about that. So it's not like I'm just sort of condoning the behavior, but I'm saying that there is an innocence in when we get caught up. And what the mother, later on, I sort of sent her a little message to sow a few little seeds of what I was thinking. And she said, that makes perfect sense, complete sense. And she said, what I did was, I didn't pay much attention. I didn't interrogate my child. I just said, don't do it again. Don't behave like that again. And I thought, that would be like someone telling you, don't get caught up in your ego again. Or don't you go in a low mood and then get all stroppy about something again. Or, you know, if you don't know where it's coming from, if you know where it's coming from, then you have more option. But when I talked to my sister about this, because she was that third child, well, she's not the third child, but out of 4 of us, she was the one who was seen as a bit difficult. And she was the one who, there was a lot of story, and everyone looked at her behavior and lost sight of her. And I said to her, and I was talking to her about this, and she said, I never knew why I behaved the way I did. I never knew why I got so angry. And then I would lash out, and I would, you know, do this and that, and, you know, and I would ruin that holiday, or I would ruin that game. Or she said, I didn't like doing it. I didn't know how to not do it, because she didn't know where her feelings were coming from. So there's this innocence. And again, you know, with Georgia, she wrote me this note. In fact, I've got this note here that she wrote me. I think I showed this to you, Jen and Dave. And at this point, I had stopped focusing on the behavior, because the behavior did come out as quite, you know, angry, and there would be a lot of lashing out, but it was coming, you know, from fear. And I had started to see that, you know, and so I didn't focus on the behavior anymore. And there was this one night, if I had focused on the behavior, I remember what it was this particular night. It was 2 a.m, because she was refusing to go to bed, and there was a big hoo-ha going on because she didn't want to go to school the next day. And what she'd done was she'd wrapped herself up in this rug and she wouldn't come out of this rug, and I couldn't unroll her because she's quite strong. And so I remember thinking, oh, sod it, she's fine, let her sleep inside the rug, because, you know, whatever, she's fine. And so that was the behavior at that moment. And she'd written me a note, and she said, Mummy, she said, I'm reading it now. She said, I'm sorry that I'm not getting this, but I am trying. I want to be in control of it. I had a bad day today, and I did try to do and think all those things. I understand them, but that obviously is not enough. I went to art, but cried at the door, and the same with maths. I am understanding, but it's not working. I'm sorry for being angry, but I'm scared and feeling alone and trapped in this story. And that makes me quite emotional to read that. Oh God. But the thing is, it was a real struggle. It was a real struggle. She did come out of the carpet though. and and the thing is, but there is an innocence in it. Can you see the innocence in it? She didn't want to be doing it. And the same with the child who's really angry or, you know, whatever. And the same with my sister, you know, is that there's such an innocence when you don't know you don't know how life is working. And then when you see how it works, there is just so much more there's just so much more compassion. You know, there's so much more understanding. And then that was why Georgia wrote me the note, because she can sort of, I wasn't there going, why are you in this rug? And why are you behaving like this? Because I wasn't interested in the behavior anymore. I knew where it was coming from. And I knew that she was okay. And I was spending more time sort of looking out the window, and I was calmer. And that gave her a chance, I think, to sort of be able to reflect. And then and then eventually she just decided to change her mind in the same way that I had. And she could just see that she didn't have to engage with her anxious thinking, and she could let go of some of the stories, and she could just live again. And so now that's what she's doing. And I think I need to finish because I'm talking too long, but Dave, you went over. But I think the thing is as well, I'm just going to show you one other picture, okay? Just so you're not looking at me in my teary eyes. Can you see this picture here? Whoops. So that picture is me when I was pregnant with Charlie. And this is the thing, okay? So before I came across this understanding, what I would like to do, if I ever got stressed, or if I ever got sort of anxious, or if I find life a bit much, what I would like to do is go and stand in the sea. And I'd often like to do that in winter as well, because, you know, that's when it would be a bit rougher. And I felt so grounded when I was standing in the sea, partly because I was freezing, so I was completely present and in the moment, but also I just felt the power, and I felt the energy. I felt part of whatever it was, whatever it is. But I never knew what that was. And so when I tried to think about it, I'd sort of lose it, but I knew, I knew that when I was standing there in the sea with my baby, I love that picture, just found it. I knew that there was something more. I knew that there was this energy. And when I went to see Dave and Jen, it was like they put it into words and they sort of legitimized it. And then, it all made sense. And it's such a knowing. It's such a knowing. And what it does is it brings back the joy into life. It's just, nothing is that serious anymore, because we've all got this energy running through us. We're all the same. And then it just all makes sense. And it's just, yeah, it just brings back the joy. The joy is what I would say comes from having this understanding. And that's why I like to try and find ways of sharing it. And I never know whether I manage, but just to bring a bit less serious is what it is.
Thanks. It's funny, isn't it? It's like you looking at this now, looking at just having you on this, and Was it February?
February, yeah.
Like the time we were through in Grasmere, and I got this phone call off a very frantic mother. I need you to help me. I need you to help my daughter. And we generally know that if somebody phones us up and says, I need you to help my daughter, I need you to help my son, well, we need you to come along as well. You know, kids look to the parents. They're always looking to the parents. These little beings who are born into this mad existence, born into this reality that out of nowhere has just emerged. We're trying to make sense of the world as children. We're trying to make, as adults, we're trying to make sense of the world. There isn't a map. There isn't a blueprint. There isn't a direction. There's just infinite possibility, and life can be the most overwhelming thing. And so as a kid, we look to our parents for guidance, and it's amazing the traits we pick up along the way, the little beliefs, things we're told. Ooh, you're the shy one. Jenny's the shy one. Or they don't like dogs. They don't like dogs. Oh, I don't like dogs. How much kids are looking to the parents. And I remember you telling us, Kate, like you were saying about how George is a very sensitive child, and you told us about this letter and the books you'd sent into school about how to deal with a sensitive child. And I said, where is Georgia? And you went, she's in the car, she won't get out. I said, well, that's not very sensitive, is it? I said, that's stubborn. George is not being sensitive now. George is being stubborn. Where's George's sensitiveness now? You went, nobody's ever spoken to me like that.
I never said that. I never said that.
Nobody's ever said that to me. And it was so interesting because you came up with Georgia with the hope that somehow we were going to fix her. The thing is, nobody on earth needs fixing. I remember saying to Dina, who's in the top right of my screen, wave your hand, Dee. We were at our community group, and Dee was talking. I said, how long have you been trying to fix yourself? And you went, years. I said, how's it going? You went, not very well. Such an interesting thing. People spend their life trying to fix themselves, only to never be able to fix it. And I remember saying to you there and then, Dee, I said, have you ever considered you can't fix yourself because what you're trying to fix isn't broken? Nobody's broken. You cannot be broken. What you are is a spiritual, if you want to use that word, energy, whatever, it doesn't matter. Use the scientific words, use the religious words, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just their concepts. Science and religion are both concepts. But what they're guiding people towards, what they're trying to point people towards, is true, is real. In fact, it's the only true reality. This reality I see now isn't the true reality. The true reality lies in the force that enables the reality to come into being. If my reality was true, everybody would see the same world I see. We won't be having this conversation. We wouldn't need to. Wouldn't need to have any conversation. Language would be made redundant, because all language is an expression of our reality. So we can put into words and convey our reality to the next person. If reality was real, substantial external event to which we were subjected, language wouldn't be required. The fact we have reality, the fact we have language points directly to the fact that reality is a subjective thing. So we can communicate about it. But it was so interesting when you came up, Kate, and Georgia wasn't in a place to listen. She wasn't interested. She wanted to go climbing. She wanted to go and see the Lake District. She didn't want to sit around and talk about the nature of mind. But you heard something. And when you saw Georgia's wholeness, and you saw that Georgia's behavior wasn't coming from some broken aspect of her being, it was coming from beliefs she was carrying. It was coming from ideologies that she held about herself and the world and other people and school and particular teachers. Once you start to see that this is truly an experiential reality, it is truly a thought-created reality. Once you truly start to see that, not just believe it, but once you actually realize this is true, there's a vast difference between belief and knowing, seeing, realizing, epiphany. But because you saw that, Kate, you saw that because you saw that in yourself, you saw that within Georgia. And the moment that your demeanor changed around Georgia, I remember saying to you, it might react, you know, there might be a kickoff.
There was.
Yeah, when you come to change and you start being different around Georgia, there's going to be some form of rebellion. Most often there's some kind of rebellion comes back as the ante is properly upped so that Georgia can say, look, I truly am fucked up. I truly am lost. But you stood your ground in your knowing that Georgia was fundamentally fine. Her feelings are not her. Her thoughts are not her. She's not that thought or this thought. She's not that belief or this belief. And because you saw that, your approach, this little being who was looking up to mum for guidance, suddenly started to get different guidance. And she changed because you changed. And I think this is such a thing. I'm not a parent. I've got a Jack Russell. I know that when my attitude changed towards him, his attitude changed towards me. Just doesn't. And when we start to find that love and light, that understanding, well, that really does open up the doors for possibilities. Kate, thank you so much for being with us today.
Can I show you one more picture?
Yeah, and then we'll take a break.
See if you can see. I don't know if you're going to see this or not, but you might be able to see.
Oh, Inspector.
Can you see? So that's this morning.
Wow.
And so again, you see you've got see how it's just all an illusion? So then you've got, because I thought, well, so you've got the sun, and then our reality is this. It's like a shadow, but it's like it's all a sort of it is all an illusion, and we get so caught up in it, and then we forget that we can actually spend some time in this sort of what I call passive, I don't know, just away from our realities, you know, where we get the energy. And but that bit, I mean, I have actually got I've got a halo. Can you see my halo going? What is that?
That's a Brockenspector. It's called a Brockenspector, isn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty cool.
Last time I saw one of them, we were stood on Lion's Head in Cape Town, and it was fantastic. Thank you, Kate. We're going to take a break. We've run over again. So we'll come back at 25 to 4. So we'll have a 15-minute break. And then what we're hoping for is any questions that have come up for people over the day. Kate, are you staying on?
I've got to go now do my school run.
Okay. We're going to do school run. Any questions for Kate, we'll pass them on. But if there's any questions, any observations, anything that's kind of occurred for people, any realizations or just any reflections, then we'd like to hear them towards like when we come back until we finish. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
15 minutes. Thanks, Kate.
Bye. Thank you.